This is Risky Women Radio, a show that connects, celebrates and champions women in risk, regulation and compliance. We're here to share the insights on the biggest issues in our industry and hear inspiring journeys from our global members. Sign up to our newsletter at riskywomen.org. I'm Kimberly Cole, your Chief Risky Woman. Welcome to Risky Women Radio. Today's Risky Woman is Helena Frumson, Managing Director, Corporate and Business Development for EMEA at Numerics and co-founder of Infinita Club. And before I kick off with hearing all about Helena, let's just give you all a couple of actions. Can you please sign up and follow us on all of our Risky Women social channels, Instagram, X, and please also join us in the LinkedIn group. Make sure you also go to our Risky Women website, riskywomen.org, and sign up for our Raw newsletter so that you don't miss anything that's going on, including when the latest Risky Women Radio podcast is released. We've also been super busy at Risky Women. We've added rev-up sessions to our repertoire. We aim to have at least one rev-up session per month, and for members, these sessions are part of your membership. Risky Women has many different elements from live events to podcasts, and our rev-up sessions are aimed at building on your already amazing superpowers. Sessions so far have included media training with Chris Dobson, voice and gravitas with the amazing David Pope, storytelling with Sundari Mukherjee. We did how to write a book with Jennifer Geary, which was fantastic, and negotiating for more by Black Isle Dynamo Heather Lindhart, and there's plenty more to come. So make sure you go to our website and sign up to be a member. But without further ado, let me introduce Helena. She is going to talk about risk management as a revenue enabler. So with 25 years in international leadership, Helena excels in scaling organizations and crafting impactful business cases. She is trusted by CEOs and investment funds and drives strategic decisions and fosters growth through alliances. Passionate about commerce, innovation and teamwork, Helena's expertise spans finance, education and fashion. So I've given a very brief introduction. Welcome, Helena. Now in your words, tell us your story.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, and thank you for inviting me. I'm excited, and I especially appreciate the emphasis on fashion, of course, which is very relevant to risk topic.
Well, you're looking very fashionable, so
thank
fantastic.
you. I'm trying to level up here. Thank you. My story is, you've captured it quite well. I've started my career from fascination about commerce and commercial diplomacy. I've ended up serving in 3 fields officially: education, fashion, and financial technology and finance eventually. And as a sidekick, I also, since 21 years ago, I've advised and consulted startup CEOs and founders on their commercial strategy and on a way to shortcut the runway money burning period during the setup of a startup phase. So that's about me. I come from family where my mom says we don't have salespeople in our family. This is as much as my family is linked to commerce. So that's a bit of contradictory to my career. But I try to convince everybody that not every bad thing that you see in life should be called sales and commerce. I think we'll get to it with a couple of use cases here.
Excellent, excellent. So you've got a couple of different, firms that we named in the bio there that I gave. So can you give us a brief overview of Numerics, then also tell us about Infinita Club?
Absolutely. So Numerics, I love the new line of Numerics since our rebrand. It sounds when numbers matter. When numbers matter, people tend to come to Numerics, both in front office and risk division, advisories, consultancies, audit, and even regulatory market. Numerics works with a tremendous amount of players on the market, and one of the biggest use cases that you may have heard of is the unwinding of Lehman portfolio, where Numerics acted as valuation agent. And many more since then, many more successes for capital allocation and risk management, holistic risk approach really across different desks in a bank or any financial institution.
Excellent. Very interesting. And what about Infinita Club?
Infinita Club is my little baby. It's a realization of my love to commercial diplomacy, where I connect between people of different backgrounds, whether it's capital and startups or whether it's advising startups on how to get up to speed. It's still very young. It's only about 8 weeks old, but I hope for a bright future for this baby.
And I love that commercial diplomacy. And from what you described to me as well, it's almost like you're building an ecosystem of connections.
I am a person of ecosystem, and I think that peace and love on this earth will come from commerce faster than from diplomacy or from politicians, let's say.
Very good, very good. Now, thinking about your career, what was the biggest risk that you've taken, and do you think it paid off?
The biggest risk so far, and I hope that the biggest risks are still ahead of me, of course, the biggest risk so far was jumping on board of a little startup company which didn't make any money, but invited me to come and be CEO for the company at the age of 25. I was super proud of myself, you may imagine. And there was a success story with this company, but the risk, of course, was to never come back into my corporate career. And come back to corporate career actually was quite difficult after this jump, but I learned a tremendous amount of lessons for life, which served me today very well.
Interesting. And the getting back into corporate was just a timing challenge?
It was timing, it was having children. We women may appreciate that penalty, but it worked in the end.
Always interesting to see those twists and turns. And if you were going to give advice to your younger self when you were starting out or thinking about people starting out, what would you give for thinking about your career journey?
It's a very interesting question, because first that comes to your mind is, of course, what could I have done better in my achievements or mentoring and supporting others, but actually I'll focus on self-care and love to your own self and care for your own body, because this is the ultimate automobile that drives you through life, which I didn't appreciate. I felt too invincible to really care for myself, and I had to learn it hard way. And thankfully, I had great mentors that helped me understand that unless you really look after yourself, there's very little you can do for others.
Yes, it's that analogy of when you're on the plane, yes, they say put the mask on yourself first before you put masks on others around you.
That's exactly what my mentor used as analogy. Thank you, Kimberly.
There you go. So, fascinating career journey. And as you said, you think there's probably more risks and more opportunities ahead. So that's super exciting as well. But to end this section, can you tell me who inspires you? So are there risky women or just women in general that inspire you?
It's a very tricky question. If I start naming people who inspire me, the list will be just incredibly long. I tend to turn to historical figures for inspiration, because these people, this woman often would stand up to environment that was not necessarily voting for them, from ancient Egyptian times or queens, all the way to contemporary women who inspire me to take the leap, to take that risk we talk about. And one person I probably will name is my mother. Her name is Tamara. She's an economist, and she's the one person who thinks that we're not in sales here. Her resilience and her ability to remain focused and structured at all times is just incredible. Now, she's not an easy person. I didn't say that was the case, but certainly she has inspired me for my career. She is the go girl, and so is my dad and my husband. And I have two best friends who were with me at all times. One of them is a lawyer, and another one of them, she's PhD in mechanical engineering, and she's a technical person. But both of them are always go girl. No matter what happens, how low or high you are, they're there. And they are incredible achievers.
Fantastic. And I think that's another good thing, a good piece of advice, is that sort of creating your own personal board to support, to guide, to mentor, to advise.
Absolutely. I mean, eventually you face these people sitting on two different shoulders and saying contradictory things, you may imagine, but this is the personal sounding board for sure.
Okay, let's take a break before we get into risk management as a revenue enabler. I want to tell you all about our most recent initiative, which is Risky Women Write. It's our writing competition. At Risky Women, we want to continue to amplify the voice of women in the industry and champion our thought leadership capability. So in partnership with Beauville Newgate, we are pleased to announce the Risky Women Writing Competition, Risky Women Write. Given statistics from the recent Women in Media Gender Scorecard, we see that continually we are severely underrepresented in terms of media coverage as both sources and experts. Women only account for 43% of bylines written, and men are generally featured disproportionately as 70% of quoted sources and 66% of experts. So we want to address this imbalance and showcase some hot topics and give you a chance to show your knowledge in the risk and compliance arena. So go to Risky Women website, that's www.riskywomen.org, to see all the details and get your entry in now. Okay, Helena, tell us more about risk management. We want to talk about it as an enabler. However, it's often perceived as a roadblock, and you really see the function differently and as that real business enabler. So tell me more about that.
It is very interesting how we use the word perceived or pictured, portrayed, because it really isn't. But it's perceived that way, whether to explain why we are not successful enough in the front office, or to simply conflict and get it out of the way so whatever I want to do will be permitted. And this is a boundary division, right? And unfortunately or fortunately, we women find ourselves often in setting the boundaries for family, for friends, for at work. So to me, it is absolutely a revenue enabling division. It sets the right boundaries within the framework of which you can truly benefit yourself, organization, and your shareholders and build trust with your clients. One of the biggest obstacles to peace, if you will, between banking sector and regular Joe and Jane and myself out there on the market after the crisis of 2009, 2008, was lack of trust. People simply didn't trust banks. And we had a beautiful roundtable in Ireland and Dublin with C-level banking community, each of which said, where is the trust? How do we build trust? And so it is risk managers actually devoted themselves into this position of let's build trust again. Let's demonstrate that we are responsible, that yes, we want to be adventurous, we want to invest, but we want to put the right boundary. And you, dear shareholder, and you, dear regular person, taxpayer who bailed us out, can sleep well, will do just well this time around. And systemic risk is not to come again from us.
Which is interesting because that's taken that risk function to the C-suite as well.
Absolutely, propelled it to the board because someone adult had to come to the board and explain to people who are not necessarily technical how the toxic portfolios or less toxic portfolios that they sit in on translate into an opportunity or maybe lack of opportunity for the banks. And then we saw a terrible amount of toxicity disposed of banking portfolios in 2012, 14, 16, and so on.
Yeah. Interesting. And often some of the things that I think we see is that if nothing goes wrong, that risk and compliance is obviously it's working very effectively, but often the value is not realised. So how do we manage that issue? That we're kind of dismissing when risk and compliance works well as having no value.
I would say that from my perspective and in my humble opinion, the way to not let people dismiss this is just to speak up and to explain and market what is it you're doing across organization. Organization consists of humans. Humans buy into certain messages. You've got to build your coalition, your alliance, right? Why to not go around in times of peace and explain exactly how you enable front office to succeed? And what is it you do to build that trust with your taxpayers and with your clients? And how do you benefit shareholder in the end? Something like RWAs directly translates into share value. It's quite easy to actually sell it upwards, sideways, and downwards.
Interesting, yes. So what does success look like when risk and compliance is really working well? And what do you see are the real measures of success?
I see, first of all, of course, for financial organizations, we want to see the share value going up, right? We want a steady, resilient business model that is not vulnerable to shocks and turbulence on the market. We want to see the ROIs with the right capital allocated into right areas of the business, right portfolios and right asset classes. We want to build, again, I am probably a broken record here, but we want to build trust with the community. To do that, we should avoid use cases like Silicon Valley Bank collapse or like 2008 crisis, or even like the examples that we've discussed earlier regarding Credit Suisse. And some will say, people just ask to be more commercial. I would avoid calling all things bad commerce. Again, I would say that was utter compliance with wrong identification of a client, wrong ranking of a client, and wrong pipeline creation. So I would say probably, again, share value, return on investment, trust with the community, and of course, well-oiled communication within organization when one division isn't seen as inferior to another.
Yes, that is often part of the challenge, isn't it? And interesting you mentioned capital allocation there, because part of that effective risk management means that you often would have better capital allocation, better, not having to allocate so much funds, etc., in particular areas. So I think there's lots of things that play into how the risk and compliance function can really be a revenue enabler.
Absolutely. And risk and compliance, to those motivated people in front office, they can give options. That's the beauty of it. It's not that everything that person does, we've slapped and punched. No, don't do it. With the right framework, we don't say don't do it. We equally as much say don't do that, but here are 5 other options, each of which presents a tremendous opportunity for the whole organization. So by doing it, not just you benefit your front office performance and KPIs, OKRs, or whatever you name it, but you benefit the whole structure, the whole ecosystem and food chain from top management in the bank all the way down to simple consumer of banking services who will be able to withdraw his check in the end of the month.
Excellent. So given all of your years of experience and the customers that you're dealing with, what is the landscape that the current risk compliance professional is operating in? And what do you think are the key attributes of those superstars in that function?
I see, again, my vision is just my vision, of course. I see, first of all, you need to learn to say no without calling for calamity and tantrum and throwing toys out of a pram across the table. You need to learn to demonstrate that the framework that you're offering is actually a healthy environment for successful business and revenue generation, because this is what business is about. It's about benefiting shareholders, generating revenue, and surviving. So that ability to say no and to be attentive to detail and to be, to a certain extent, diplomatic, but with essence and content in this diplomacy are the key attributes that I would allocate to this position with my view.
Great. And thinking about the individuals, so the ones who have got some of those attributes, but what do you see as the opportunity for risk and compliance individuals? Because we talked a bit about this opportunity of now this is at board level. So what are you kind of seeing in terms of career development, career options?
I certainly see a possibility and desire across chief risk officers to get into the board position. Not always these people make it to the board or make it to the board with the same ranking and amount of attention that they deserve. And I think that there is a way to go. There is quite a bit to be done. And again, across my network, across female CROs, I do see that often it's unrealized desire, and they keep moving organizations until they find that place where they can have access to the board. Although we also hear boards complaining that they don't have enough women in pipeline, which is almost as if it contradicts the first statement. I believe that there is potential. I think we will see more chief risk officers in the boards. I think we will see more chief compliance officers, more ESG-related positions in boards, simply because the whole world goes that direction. And the positive side of it is that today these people are taken seriously, not just by organizations, but also by providers, suppliers, and vendors. For instance, I just spoke with CEO of a brand new clearinghouse that is being put together in Europe. And the first pitch that he had in his mind is, we need to make risk managers comfortable. We need to make risk comfortable. We need to provide them with agile reporting and all that. So there are many people in the ecosystem who already think about risk management and risk position as a very significant decision-making department in the institution.
Great. What are you seeing in terms of risks functions leveraging technology and more strategic thinking, I guess, to ensure that the overall institutional health is there with an organisation that you talked about, that sustainability, but also from a growth perspective?
Absolutely. It's a great question. It's actually very easy for me to see it because I see it almost from cheering from sidelines, if you will. I had a dinner with the chief risk officer in an organization which my department sold to. And it was a revealing meeting for me because I do feel the pain, but sometimes I'd love to also see the success story. We were sitting there and that chief risk officer tells me, you know what? Our share value just went up. I said, how did it happen? He said, we had this big portfolio of very complex derivative products, which they couldn't value properly. But he said, we managed to value them properly with the right technology, which at that stage was numerics. And then he said, as soon as we were able to value, we passed our audit with great success. So the auditor, Big Four auditor, put that stamp, halal or kosher or whatever you prefer to think of it. And after passing the audit, the ranking agency actually upticked their rank. And that inevitably led to a positive outlook on this company by not just existing shareholders, but by new shareholders in the public company. So all this food chain demonstrates that one little change and one little control function or one little ability to take control over a particular function can lead all the way to changing the share value. And I think it's tremendous success.
A real ripple effect of like throwing a stone in a lake. Very interesting. And I guess now, if you think of the future, what do you predict for the future of risk and compliance, both for departments, but the individuals who make them up? What's your vision of what's going to be next?
I think we will see more of a pipeline of interesting, smart individuals, even better pipeline coming into these divisions, because these divisions become very important compared to 20 years ago. We all know exactly where risk management was and what was the attitude and which language front office would speak about risk management. It's different today. Today, if risk management allows, we can do it. We can issue a new product, but then if they manage to shorten time or time framework within which we can issue that product from 9 months to 3 months, then that's amazing. So they actually start seeing it. Risk management becomes more appealing. I think more and more individuals are interested in these roles. ESG is growing as part of, overall outlook on responsible and ethical investments. Compliance, certainly. I think we'll see more empowered people in these divisions more confident, more agile to deal with the changes on the market, economics, politics, etc., and more respected. And as a result, I believe there will be more collaboration and institutions will become just healthier. There will be another pillar, if you will, upon which they can rely and move on in a healthier way.
Great. So in summary then, when we're thinking about risk management as a revenue enabler, key is absolutely that using risk and compliance to build that level of trust. What are those other key things that our listeners should keep in mind?
Building trust, enabling revenue, allowing or enabling the right reporting leading to share value to go up, and certainly avoiding systemic risk for the whole market, which is so important because it affects the whole economy and the whole country or global situation.
Great. So I think good opportunity for individuals in the space, but also such an important function for all of our institutions. Now we're on to our Risky Women wrap-up, or our Rants and Revelations, as I like to call it. So the one that we ask all of our Risky Women: are you optimistic, pessimistic, or neutral in your outlook for the year ahead?
It's a very good question. It's a difficult question because we live in very interesting and uncertain times. I am optimistic by choice, not naturally, but by choice. I choose to be optimistic. Things are shaky in the market, but I stay optimistic.
Excellent. I think we have a lot of risky women who remain optimistic, which is good. Now, what would you describe, or what do you think is the top risk for the year ahead?
If I remove from my horizon all the digital assets and AI, emerging technologies, and the potential risk of those and financial markets and generally on our lives, I probably will look at politics and say that elections, we see how turbulent is elections year for many countries, what it leads to and how that demonstrates on the streets of different cities. We have right next door 2 wars in Ukraine, Israel, and I see that there is quite a calamity globally around political situation. However, I think the biggest risk in that is actually potential dictatorship or totalitarian that may emerge out of this turbulence, because we have a problem. If we don't handle this problem properly, then people may automatically vote or opt for more dictator environment, maybe benevolent dictators, but still dictators. That I would see as a risk, not just for economies and finance, but generally for us and for our future of our children.
Yeah, there's so much geopolitical risk at the moment, and something like 2/3 of the world going through elections this year. So it's a massive political upheaval everywhere. So yes, very true. And we touched on this a little bit, but what's your best advice for the next generation of compliance professionals?
I would say to remain positive, yes, to remain optimistic, to learn to say no, and to learn to say yes intentionally, not because you're pressed or cornered or ambushed, but because you believe that this is the right thing to do. For we already saw what happens when we don't say no or yes intentionally.
Okay, good. And then on a more lighter note then, a book to read, something to watch, and or a podcast that you recommend?
Whew, the 2 books that I have in mind are not light at all, but I will still recommend them. First one is called Menticide, or Rape of the Mind, by Joost Merlo. He was a psychiatrist and resilient anti-Nazi activist in Netherlands. And this precisely links to the topic of dictatorships and how to spot a dictator and how to stand up to that opportunity with no thank you, potentially. And another book that I really loved, and I discovered that many women don't know of, it's Beauty Myth Against Women by Naomi Wolf. I really recommend that book for any mother of girl or a boy, or really for any mother, for any parent, for ourselves. I think this book tells us quite some information that we should have learned when we were 15, but we didn't. So it's good to, better later than never, at least it was for me.
Yes, that's true. The Beauty Myth, I read that many years ago, but yeah, good reminder on some of these books that are out there that may be worth going back to. So now, maybe you can leave us with some inspiration. So what's a key message, a thought or a quote that you would like to end on to inspire our risky women?
Absolutely. Let me share a quote by my father, which made me into an optimist. There are no hopeless situations. I think this message I've heard thousands or tens of thousands of times. And I live by this message. There are no hopeless situations. In any situation, we can find a way out of it. We can collaborate, build alliance, find our inner strength when we think we don't have, but there is a way out of it.
Well, that is lovely. Thank you very much, Helena, for sharing how risk can be a revenue enabler and all of those other very thoughtful career aspirations and ideas there. So that's brilliant. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, for inviting me for this beautiful recording, this beautiful studio in London. I appreciate your time.
Pleasure. Okay, so that's a wrap for today's Risky Women Radio. A few more actions for you before you go. If you can, on whatever is your favourite podcast channel, give us a 5-star rating and maybe leave us a message. And Risky Women has now connected, celebrated and championed women in risk regulation and compliance for 10 years. And we're continuing to grow and expand our network. So please become a member or lead a group of risky women by becoming a ringleader. So just go to our website, riskywomen.org, and click on the membership link. And don't forget to sign up or follow us on all of our social channels, Instagram, X, and join the LinkedIn group as well. And sign up for the newsletter so that you don't miss anything that's going on, from events to when the next Risky Women Radio podcast is released. So thank you for listening, and we will see you at our next event or hear you right here on Risky Women Radio.